So we're going to look at some information flow in React. And realistically, what that means is that right now we can only pass data from our parent components to child components via props. Um, when people start developing beyond just trivial things, they're like, how can I pass data back up? Um, Short version, you can't, but you can pass down things that let you manipulate data up top. So this is basically how to simulate that two-way data flow. And I think, well, I could talk, but I think it'd be more useful to get fingers on keys. So let's do that here. Uh, there. Where's chat? Do I have chat open? There's chat. Hey, zoom, zoom, zoom. Alrighty. So let me. Hey, this is the stuff we were working on before. We got sandwiches and counters and names and everything. Um, I think I want to go back to the button stuff. So I'm gonna. Such a shame to get rid of this. I'm just gonna throw this in a scratch file somewhere. Scratch. Right. Bloop. All right. So I think what I'd like to do is go back to that counter example, and I'm gonna set up. Well, let's walk through it to review what it looks like anyway. Um, so I'm gonna return, and that was I had that div class name app, and we'll keep that. So here in our function, we're gonna return that div, close it up, and I'll just have H1 in here that says hello, and format that. I'll open our terminal and npm start. I called this tarot demo and it has absolutely nothing to do with anything. Great. So we've got our bud started up here. Option Command J will open up my console. So I think what I want to do is put the counter example. So we'll have a count with a number that goes up when we click a button. And so just to review, let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to create a state. So a state is data that is attached to this component. So I'm going to use our use state hook, which we've imported already. So remember, use state returns a getter and a setter. So I'm going to call a count and set count. Use state and then set a default value there. So use state is a function that we're importing from React, setting the default value to 0. That's going to return the value and a function that we can use to set it. Cool. And so we can use that count to display. So I'm going to count and then put that value in curly brackets there. So we should see a count 0 here. Great. And now we're going to hook up a button to change that state when we click it. So I'm just going to add a button, increment, and I'm going to add a click handler on there. On click, and that's going to call, yeah, right now I'll just do set count plus 1. So I'm passing as an event handler here this function, this arrow function, and all this function is doing is calling set count with the count plus 1. So it's going to take the current count, increment it by 1, and set that new count. Again, set count is our state setter, which means it sends a request to React to enqueue a change when it gets around to it, which for us happens almost instantly. So boom, 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 boom. Great. That works. Cool. Any quick questions about this part so far? So we're not jumping ahead without everyone being on the same page.
Hey, super quick question here.
Yeah.
And I think this is just me mentally tying back to JavaScript, but like when you have the on click equals,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to put like E or event like anywhere in there.
Yeah, so it passes the event into this function, but we're not using it. So I'm just saying just don't worry about E at all. But yeah,
Got
every
it.
event handler is going to pass the event as an argument to the handler. We're just not using it here.
Got it.
Yeah, so if it was a form, we would say E and then do stuff with the form probably, or a drop down or a field that we're getting the value out of or something. But yeah, event handlers always pass the event into the function. Kimberly, yeah.
As a follow-up to that question, we can use E though, right? We're just not using it.
Yeah, sure. We can grab E or event there. But since we're not using it anywhere, you can see it's kind of grayed out there. I just tend not to. So it's clear like we're not using it, because if I had, oh, I have event and I'm doing set count count, my programmer brain takes a half a second to be like, where are we using event? And then we're not. So
Okay.
just to make it clearer to the reader, which is me right now and you. Yeah, just making our intents explicit. Any other questions? Cool. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into two components, or I'm going to add two components to it. I'm just going to have a counter.js, and I'm going to have a counter button.js. Great. So in the counter, I'm going to have this. So that's going to be the whole thing. Take that there. I'm going to put it in counter, export default function, counter, and return that. Cool. And since we are displaying a count, I'm going to need to take that in as props. So I could do props and then do props.count, or I could just destructure the count right out of it, which is what I'm going to do. So this is returning the count. It's going to take in some information. And so again, this components are cool because now this component doesn't care where it's getting that number or whatever it is from. It just knows when you use me, give me a number and I will display it in this way. Azani, yeah.
Hey, I'm sorry. I feel like this question is a little behind, but like you don't have to put like import React and all that on every component.
Not anymore. No, you used to, but React takes care of that for you now with the build process.
Got it.
Yeah. David. Did David have a hand up?
A little behind today. I was just wondering what your personal approach is to what's a component and what isn't a component, because a lot of it seems to be like, yeah, it's your personal preference.
Yeah. And it's kind of it's definitely like rule 2 territory. It's whatever makes it easier for you to work with, understand, and debug. And in general, so the primary thing is the first thing is, am I doing something more than once in a program? In this one, we're not, because this is just a demo. But if like, oh, if I have the same kind of button in two places, or if I have the same kind of if I'm putting things in a list or in a grid, or if I have the things I want to use more than once, or I'm passing different kinds of information into a thing I want to display in certain ways. That's definitely a component. And then second step is like more of a logical grouping. Like, oh, I have something that is, displaying a list of things. I might want to make that list a component just to kind of separate it out and say, like, here's a display list. It's going to have this responsibility. It's only going to display these things. Give me a list and I'll put them on the screen. And so it's kind of the same intuition you use when you're breaking JavaScript into functions. As like, when do I make a function? Like, oh, I could probably make this thing one big chunk of code, but breaking it into functions, which is what we're doing when we're breaking into components, breaking it into functions just makes it easier to kind of think about. And when I look at it, I'm like, oh, this is putting things on the page. So I'm going to call that thing putting on the page. So it's purely for us to understand it better.
Okay, I get the sort of UI component aspect of it. That's pretty straightforward. It's just it's just the execution part that we're struggling with. But yeah, it makes sense to approach it from the JavaScript point of view for sure.
Yeah, so like for here, I'm saying, oh, counter, I'm going to pass count equals count into that. So for me, I don't care how the counter is implemented inside. It could be a div, it could be a modal, it could be some corner display, it could be any number of things. I just know I'm putting my counter here. How that is implemented is up to whoever's implementing that. And likewise in here, I'm just saying, oh, I know you're giving me a counter thing. I'm going to do this, the way that I'm supposed to do it here. So this, could be way more complicated. Of course, this could be 30 lines of whatever, and just putting it in a component instead of putting those 30 lines here lets me easily see, okay, here's a counter here. It's taking the count. Great. If I'm not actively working on that, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to trudge through all that code to get to the part that I'm looking for.
Cool. Makes sense. Thank you.
Other David, yeah.
Yeah. For your preference, do you think it's easier to build everything out in, say, the app.js page and then break it out into components afterwards, or maybe build a bunch of pages and then put it together into the app?
I will often do that, like just like we saw here. I think if it's that second type of component, I will often like build out the app stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of a big chunk to see there. Then I'll pull it out and break it out, the same way you'd refactor a function out. If it's the first kind, if it's like, oh, there's a button or a list item or something like that, then I'll usually won't bother putting those in the main page first. I just kind of like build those out. Cool. Anything else? Awesome. So yeah, so we've already broken this one out here. I've made a counter. I'm importing it here, and all I'm doing is passing the count in as a property. And so that's expecting something called count, and it's just going to display that count. And so this should behave exactly the same way, and it does. Great. So, and this is our sort of downhill information flow here. We have a component we're passing information to from the parent. This is stuff that we've seen already. So here's the fun part here. Let's make the button component. We have our counter button there. So I'm just gonna copy paste this for now, just to get something in there. For default function counter button. I'm not gonna put anything there yet. Oops, that's not what I want to do. Cool. So I'm just returning that button. I just put it on a line with parentheses just to make it easier to see. So great. I have a button component I can use now. So I'm going to say counter button. Imported that up here. I'll get rid of that. So, and oh, look at that. It's super nice. I have a counter and I have a counter button. How it's implemented, not my problem. So we have our counter and our card. Oops, set count's not defined. Count's not defined. Oh no. So we need some way to have the counter button, A, know what the count is, and B, set that count. Unfortunately, that state is attached to the app, to our main component here. And so we can pass pieces of state down. Those pieces of state are always going to be read only. And that's especially something to keep in mind when you're passing down arrays and objects, because it's tempting to pass down an array and then do something to the array down in a child. Don't do that. You're going to be sad. It's going to be a bad time for everyone. When you're passing props down, they should be read only. So you're just passing stuff down, the component will use it and then forget about it. But that's a problem here because we have state that we want to change with our button. So our sort of idiomatic solution here is to pass down a function, and that function will do stuff in the parent. So it's going to be a callback function. So yeah, so I'm going to write a function here that does what I want. I'm going to call it increment state, increment count. So what is this function going to do? Well, it's going to do this stuff here. So I am going to set count to count plus 1. Since set count is here in our application component, that's available. Since count is available, great, I can get that. And now I have a function, and I can call it from here if I want to. I could put a button here and attach that. In fact, let me do that for just a second to show what that looks like. Onclick equals increment count. So we're just passing a function to our onclick. That function is increment count. When that gets clicked, it's going to update the count by 1. And there's a problem in here, probably. Yep. Let's comment that out. Return nothing. Nope. Return nothing. Let me just return a fragment. Or a div. Oh gosh. So picky. Div. Great. Returns an empty div. Cool. So now we have our counter. Let's go back here. When we click our counter, it should increment. Great. So we're just using this function increment count. We're putting it on the button here, and it's going to increment. So now let's go back to our counter button. Our counter button will have our button. So I'm going to pass in our handle click functions. And so since functions are just objects, I can pass that in like that. So handle click is a prop that I'm passing down, just like anything else. So I can grab that prop here. Oops, increment count. That's not what I want. Let's do that. Click. Cool. So I'm passing this handle click function in here. This so the prop is named handle click. The function I'm passing in is this increment count function that does the thing that we wanted to do. And so now, since I have a handle click, I can just say, do that thing. And again, this is all internal to this component here. It doesn't care what handle click is. Handle click could increment a counter. It could put up a display. It could do a fetch. It could do. It's just some function that does something. And all we're doing is say, hey, I'm a button. Give me some kind of function. When you click the button, I'm going to run that function. I don't care what it is. I don't care what it does. I'm just going to execute this function here. Here is where we care what it does. App is like, I need a button there and I need it to do this thing. So I'm going to give it this thing. When it gets clicked, it's going to do that thing. And because that thing happens to be updating the count, we're going to set count plus 1. Count is going to be updated. When it gets updated, this is going to re-render, and it's going to re-render with our new count. Am I lying? Let's find out. Hey, that works just fine. Cool. And like just to demonstrate, right? This could be function holler. So if I put in holler instead of enter, hey, the count's 0. So we could pass in whatever function we want. This just happens to do what we want. Oh, there we go. Cool. David, yeah. You're still muted.
My hand was still raised, sorry.
Oh, cool. Azani.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk through real quick just to make sure that I'm following like the logic behind why we're doing what's happening here. So like even though the counter button is basically what needs to use that like increment count,
Mhm.
we cannot write that function in the counter button component
Right.
because then there's like no way to let the app itself know what that does.
Yeah. So counter button does not have access to the state in app. So we need to pass it down a beeper or whatever. We want to pass it down some instructions, say, hey, when you do this, make the count go up.
Right, got it. And then one other piece, it's like we're passing that increment count function through as a attribute
Mhm.
of the component versus like putting that increment count into the line 6 and like treating it like a prop. It's like
Um,
it wouldn't make sense to do that because it's already written in the function itself.
yeah, it's already in here. Yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
And kind of just to demonstrate that a little bit more, let's put another button down there. Oops. How do keyboards work? There we go. Let's do decrement count. And so this one's gonna decrease the count. And so let's just do that. So we haven't changed anything about the button except for what function we're passing to it. And it's going to say the same thing. So let's pass a second prop in here, label. So I'm going to say label there. So now this is going to describe better what we're doing here. Label equals. Yeah, it's just a. Cool. So counter button doesn't care where it's getting called from, what's being passed in. I don't want a software update. It's taking in a function to run when it gets clicked, and it's passing in something to put on the button. And so that means we can make it do and say different things. We can label this one increment and have it run this function when it gets clicked. We can label this one decrement and have it run that function. Same component, we're just passing in different functionality to it. And there are buttons. And so we can make it go up, we can make it go down. And so this is the power move here, because if we have if this was just a label, like, oh, we have some sort of thing that's just displaying data, that's fine, that's great, components are great for that. Making components do different things when you interact with them, that is where this starts taking off. So this it feels almost trivial here, but really like play with this and let this part sink in, because this is the part that's like it's gonna make your stuff 10 times. And that is pretty much information flow in record time. There's not a lot more to it than that, other than practicing it in different contexts. And saying there's not a lot more to it than that, again, kind of trivialize it, because it's it's not a simple or intuitive concept. Like we have these functions that do something, and we still, even though we've used callback functions, in whatever before, it still takes a little while to say, okay, this thing that does something, this verb, is actually a thing that we can move around. We can actually send this verb into here and say, when you do something, here's the thing you want to do. And so we can have the same component do different things in different contexts. Yeah, Kimberly.
Can you jump back to your counter button JS for just a second?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, the compartmentalization of components is really nice, because if we have two different people working on this, we have one person that's like, cool, I need a counter button. I needed to do something when you get clicked. I need to have a label. And then a completely different person can be like, cool, I'm going to write this component. And, this could be a button, it could be a div, it could do something else. But as long as it, we've agreed that it's going to take a function and a label, these two people can work on these two parts of the application separately, and it'll work together. And a third person could come along and say like, oh, I see we have a button with something, it does something and it says something. I have this other part of the application that I can grab that and use it. So that compartmentalization is really nice. Eileen, yeah.
Oh yeah, I think Asani had his hand raised. I don't know if that was from the last question or not.
Oh yeah, no, it is a different thing, but you can go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay,
Talking too
great.
much.
All right, sure. It is related at least. I was running into issues on the shopping list lab where I was trying to pass things down like this, but there was like a map element where, so like you're supposed to be able to filter by category of the items on the page, and then each of those items has a state between like added to cart and removed from cart. And I just I can't get it to like pass through as like an array or in the format I need, because when I click one button, it changes that add to cart state for everything now. So I feel like if you could give us an example where it's a little bit more complicated and you have to pass through, like if you're creating a list of buttons.
Yeah,
and
like
then
that has, yeah, great. I can do that for sure.
okay, great.
Azani, can I get you while I'm doing that? Or yeah.
Yeah, I think my thing will be quick too. I just want to confirm something. So if you go to the counter button, JS again, so I just want to confirm, like if I write another function within this component, like let's say it's like either below or above the return, if I write another function or if I put another variable into here, the app component pretty much has no way of finding out what those are, or it doesn't have access to that information. Right?
Yeah, you could do like, function, format label, text, and then have that like return, text to uppercase or whatever, and then use that here, right? So yeah, anything outside this function, whether it's above or below, this is only available to this function here.
Got it. So then if you go back to the app component and you try to use the function format label, it'll be like, we don't know what this is.
Yeah.
Got it. All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, look, that works even. Cool. Good question. So yeah, let's take a look at what it looks like to make a list with button things. I'm gonna yeah, let's do this. Let's have what do we want to do a list of? Let's have a list of desserts, 6 sandwiches. We're gonna have some tiramisu. We're gonna have some gelato. We're gonna have some creme. There we go. And what do we have? Cookies. Great. Always hungry when I'm doing these things. So let's do a map here, and map these out. So I'm going to I'll just add stuff here. Cool. So I'm going to make a list. That's going to have my, let me put a label on it here. H1 desserts. Cool. So I'm going to just make them separate sections. So here's where I'm going to do my map. And I'll do it like this. I'll do desserts map. And so each dessert is going to, let's make a dessert component. Ooh, yeah. Dessert.js. Export default function dessert. And let's have it take in at least the name of the dessert. And I want this to return, let's return an li just with a name here. Good start. So this is, again, just going to take in a name. It's going to put that name in a list. Doesn't care where that name comes from. Doesn't care where it is. So I'm just going to dessert. It's imported up here. And say name equals dessert. So it's going to set the name of the dessert to this here. Close that off. Cool. So it's going to map. It's going to take each one of these strings. It's going to take this array and it's going to turn it into a different array. That is, each string is going to turn into a dessert component. And I'm passing that string into the dessert. That is taking it there and returning the list item. So I want to see a list of those desserts. And there they are. Great. Oh, I need a key. I need a key. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, JSX inside of JavaScript inside of, yeah, you can nest those arbitrarily deep. That's definitely where like components and functions come in, because it makes your eyes bleed after a very short time. Cool. Yeah. And remember, again, even though this looks like HTML, this is not HTML. It's a little Magritte thing. This is not a pipe. This is JavaScript. This is not a tag. This is a function. So it's saying, you know, dessert. This string is turning in. We're passing it to a function that takes these things as arguments, and that function is returning some HTML that we're going to smack in here when it gets rendered out. That's what the render does. That's what return does. Yeah, so you can nest JSX and JavaScript arbitrarily because JSX is just a bunch of functions. Great. So this is doing what I want. Let's cool. Let's add some clicky behavior to this. So what do we want to do? I'll say, yeah, here we go. I'll say current dessert and set current dessert. And so I'm going to use state there, and I'm just going to set the, say equals, and I'll set it default to none. Cool. Let's put it down here. B dessert. Dessert. So that should be none down there. Fantastic. Let me just wrap that in bolds. Great. So let's add a button to this then. And you know, let's just add it right here. Set current. Super gross, but it works. Great. I'm just gonna super picky capitalize these because my eyes don't like it. Cool. So we have no dessert now. Buttons don't do anything yet. So let's make the buttons do something. So what I would like to do is when I click this button, I want it to display this dessert here. To do that, I need a couple things. I need the button that's in the dessert here. I need it to change this state here, which means I probably need to make a function that changes that. So I'm going to make another function down here, and what do I want to call it? We already have set current dessert. Oh, you know what? I can just use. I'm gonna do a trick here. I'm gonna say handle click, and I'm just gonna say set current dessert. Look at that. We already have a function that does this. This function takes an argument and sets this current dessert. So I'm just going to pass this function in here. So I need to make sure that, yeah, so I have this function that sets the state up here. And let's see how we're going to use it here. Yeah, Azani.
Well, I think you might be answering my question with what you're about to do, so I'll wait.
Cool. Cool. So set current dessert is a function that takes a string and is going to set this value. When that value changes, it's going to re-render. So I'm passing that into my dessert component. Let's see how we're going to use that. So I'm taking in the name. I'm going to need to take in handle click as well. And now on the button, I'm going to do an on click. And so this on click, I need to set the current name, the current dessert up top to the name that I have here. So this is a function that it's an event handler. So it takes an event. We're not going to use that. So I'm just going to mess everything all up. I'm just going to do a function like this. And I'm going to call handle click, and I'm going to give it the name. Let me just space that out a little bit. There we go. So list item is going to display the name, it's displaying the button. Our on click for the button is going to be a function. That function is going to call whatever function we handled in, passed in. It could be the alert function if we wanted to. And it has a current name. We're setting it there. And basically it's going to call that function with the name. And so handle click is set current dessert. So it's going to call set current dessert with the current name that's in that thing. And so each one of those ULs has a little function on it. And hopefully, hey, that works. Awesome. Cool. So that is how you would do that. If you wanted to, again, you could write a function outside just like that. We could have it do the, just have it say, take a text and alert that text. And I added so many. There we go. So this is a function that just takes in a string and alerts that string. So when I click that, it's going to alert that string. The button, the dessert thing doesn't care what function you pass into it. It just cares that it is a function that it can call. So we're calling set current dessert. And again, we can see this is getting a little bit more complex. We have a list item and a label and a button and a clicker thing. So we could take this and we could drop that, here. We could replace all that with all that stuff, but it's going to get unwieldy. Azani, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the only thing that's confusing me here is that you didn't have to. So if you go back to the dessert component, I would have thought that you have to pull in set current dessert into this,
Yeah,
but
and
you didn't at all.
I am doing that.
Or, well, you are. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what handle click is. Again, the kind of interface we've defined here, dessert's a component that does some stuff. It takes in a name, which is a string, and takes in a function we're calling handle click. And all it's doing is putting that name here, putting that button there, and saying, when you click the button, call whatever function got passed in here and pass it that name. And so we are passing in set current dessert to that function. I don't need that there. So I'm saying handle click inside the dessert component is going to be set current dessert.
Oh, right. So handle click can be something else inside of a different
Yep.
component.
Yeah, we could
Right, which it already is.
we
Okay.
could do we could set it increment count, and then when we run it
Right.
and click a thing, it's gonna
Okay.
put our count up there.
Yes, this is very powerful. I'm just continuing to process.
Yeah, it is a lot. It is a lot. It's getting that concept of functions are things I can pass around. Functions are things I can give to components, and those components can use those functions in whatever way they want. That this could do, this could like do a fetch, and then when it comes back, do something else, and then run that function. It could, run something else as a function and pass that to that. Yeah, and this part's just getting used to how JavaScript works. It's just kind of in a different format because again, dessert is just a function. So all we're saying here, this is just like any other callback function, like map or add event listener. This is function dessert, takes, looks under the hood, kind of like, oh, we're calling that. And so dessert is our function, and we're calling it with, name and, or I'm sorry, we're calling it with dessert and, set current dessert.
Right. Yes, that's what my brain was looking for somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, and this is going to be
Okay.
that li with our and all that. So this HTML is going to be rendered into here and eventually back to our page.
Got it. All right. Very last thing, the name equals key equals and stuff. You would call those those are called props in this context still?
Props yeah.
Okay. Got it.
But they're parameters you're passing into the function. Really, they just match up with this. And yeah.
Okay, this might be a dumb question,
Yeah.
but I've noticed in certain cases, like there in the dessert, there's a space between like the name and then the prop, or the curly braces and the props. Does that need to be there, or is it just an aesthetic thing?
I think that's just how my formatter takes care of it.
Well, I noticed that they do it in the videos too, so I was just
Yeah, it's the same. White space doesn't matter at all in JavaScript. So like this could all be smacked together on one line like this. It's just that is just for us to make it easier to read. Kimberly.
This is kind of an off question, but my brain can't wrap around it right now, so I'm just going to ask it.
Yeah, go for
it. If you have a situation where you're adding to an array, like in the example, he was adding dogs to the array, and you need to give it an ID.
Yeah.
How do you give it an ID if they have an ID set in there, like for the dogs that they already have in the list, and you're adding another dog? How do you give it an ID?
I'm not sure I know what you're asking, but let me try. So do the dogs in the list that you're talking about, are those objects?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And they look like name equals not name, type is and ID is 1, like that, right?
Right.
So when you add a new thing to it, you would have to create an ID somehow. And I don't know specifics of that lab off the top of my head. If you're doing it via fetch, it'll give you back an ID when you come back.
Okay.
Otherwise, if it's dangerous because you don't know, unless it's your data and you're designing everything, you don't really know what the sequence of the ID is. Like, you don't want to necessarily give it an ID that is maybe already used if you're grabbing it from somewhere else.
Mhm.
So in that case, I will often do like ID is I don't know, it's math random, and just give it like a random number, and so that will be unlikely to collide. But in general, if there's an ID, you're going to be getting that ID from somewhere.
Okay, so it's not something you're going to find out in the wild too often.
Yeah, I mean, when you're assigning IDs like that, it's generally going to be when you like do a post, and then you get back and it's like, okay, cool, I posted this and generated in the database, the ID is 17.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And let's just do this, right? Just to demonstrate the keys. And so these are just the IDs in my stuff here. And so now, instead of a string, each cookie is an object. So I would have to change that here. So each dessert here is an object. So I'd be giving it a dessert type. And the key would be, since these are unique, dessert ID. And again, dessert doesn't care if it's coming from an object or whatever. As long as you're passing in a string there, it should work just fine. Yeah, still works fine. And this is like definitely more like what you're going to see getting actual data. Each thing is probably going to be an object, and so you have to pull stuff out of it like that. Cool, that works. What other questions do we have? Yeah, you bet. Hannah, yeah.
But then when you like person something, I mean this is for like for the next module. Something we can use that pet, right?
I'm not sure I understand.
For the next module we're going to like pet like get pet post something, right?
Yeah,
And I'm just wondering like when you're getting something, is it gonna be like from the outside API or is it gonna be like from the like the file API?
yeah. So just to be sure I get what you're asking, what, like, where are we going to be getting in, like, doing fetches to and from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have like the data and this file.
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering, is it gonna be like from this folder or is it gonna be like from outside
Yeah.
or something like that?
So we'll be doing fetches, gets, post, push, patch, and all that stuff, just the same way as we did before. So actually, let me, we have a little bit of time. Let me do a sneak preview of what we're going to be doing there. So let me make a new file. It's going to be our desserts.json. And so I'm going to do desserts, and it has to be in quotes because it's JSON. And get rid of that. I need to change all those. That I need to change all of these. To this. Right. Change all these to that. Get rid of the last one. Get rid of that. Cool. So here's my JSON of the stuff that we just did. I'm going to go ahead and start up a JSON server that serves that up. It's desserts. Where are we? Oh, it's in source. We'll do that. Cool. So this is giving us some desserts. It's over here. Cool. So this is running a little API server. It's giving us our desserts here. And so let me give you a sneak preview of what that is going to look like in our code. Get rid of that. So we don't have our desserts constant in here anymore. I want to do a get. So first off, I'm going to set up my desserts state. State. And since I know it's going to be an array, I need to put an empty array here because we're doing a map over desserts here. And if I do, oh, nothing or a string or undefined, it's going to say, I can't do a map on undefined, or I can't do a map on an empty string or whatever. So when you know a state is going to be a certain shape, like an array or an object or something, make sure that your default state is the same shape as that. So now I need to get those desserts somehow. And if you are a little bit ahead in the curriculum, you've probably seen this, but we'll be going over this in more detail on Monday for sure. There is another hook as the other hook that you'll be using all the time called use effect. And what use effect does is it's called that because it's a side effect, right? This function, normally its purpose is to take some stuff in and spit some HTML out. This is going to be a side effect, and the side effect is I'm going to go do a fetch on a server and bring stuff back. So use effect takes two arguments. One is a function, so I'm just going to do a little quick function here. Oops. Nope, not like that, like that. But we are going to use all the brackets. The second is a dependency array. Don't worry about that right now. We'll talk about it later. So basically what happens is every time this renders, use effect has got to run that function. If this is an empty array, it's only going to do it the first time. We'll talk about that in more detail on Monday. But basically, when we have use effect set up like this function is going to run the first time it loads. And now we know how to do fetch because we did that last time. So I can just put a fetch in here. And I can say fetch to our URL, which is what? This. Let me be picky and set up a const dessert API. Is that great? And so now I'm going to fetch from our dessert API. Do the JSON, turn into JSON. And then, so I'm getting back that array. I'm just going to, so set desserts is a function I can use. I'm going to give set desserts an array, and it's going to put that into state. When desserts changes, it's going to re-render it. So the flow here is the first time this runs, it's going to send off a fetch, and then it's going to render out this with an empty dessert list. So if let's say I don't do this, it's going to render out empty. Oh, unless I have it there, great. I need to run that on a different port. Let's do that. Yes, I do. Cool. So our desserts here, that's going to go with nothing. And so the first time it runs, it's going to do this fetch, and it's going to call set desserts with whatever that fetch comes back with. So it's going to set desserts to this array here. And then since desserts changed, it's going to re-render this which means it's going to do everything that we just did. So it's going to have our dessert list. Hey, look at that. And that should behave the same way. So that's how we're going to be hitting a server. Just going to be using a JSON server. You could also use an external API or whatever. Fetch works exactly the same. It's just a matter of where we plug it in. And then like preview, we can also hook up, where's my dessert button? Desserts, there we go. We can also hook up fetches that do posts and patches and deletes and stuff with whatever data we want on these. So fetch works exactly the same way. We're going to be using a JSON server for now. You'll probably use an external API for your project. But the only new thing you need to learn is this first use effect that just says the first time you run this function, and this function just happens to have a fetch in it, and that fetch just happens to be setting the state, which will render the thing with a thing. David, yeah.
Are you using state for the desserts because you're anticipating that the data in the JSON is going to change with various other fetch methods?
Well, it is going to change at least once, because if we don't have that use effect there, right? It's always going to do this first render. So it's going to render an empty array first. So it's always going to render at least twice. It's going to render the first time with nothing in it, because remember, fetches are asynchronous. So it's going to do the fetch. It's going to send off the fetch. It's going to render it empty. And then when it comes back, we need to change desserts, and it's going to re-render there. So that's why it's in state, because it needs to re-render the component when we get our data back.
Yeah, I'm just tripped up by this, like the thinking in React portion where it's like, is this state or not?
Yeah.
So
yeah, pretty much anytime there's going to be data that's going to change what things look like, that's going to be in state.
Okay.
And yeah, the tricky bit is that because the fetch is asynchronous. If we got our fetch ahead of time and already had our data, we wouldn't need to put it in state, unless we have things that change the list. And realistically, in a application, we're gonna we're gonna add likes to this, or we're gonna delete these or edit them or whatever. So we would have to edit that array.
So the React documentation that has that little dinky example is actually just oversimplified, basically.
I can see how they can kind of like similar to JavaScript. They can like make me think of like the set did that add and append and the did and then the reason why you need to have the read state is because of map, right? Like yeah. Like I got it. That makes sense. It's similar to like JavaScript when you do appending, but instead you had to do for each.
Right. Well, we have to do if we change the array, and again, since state is also supposed to be read only, because if we have our dessert list in there, at some point we do like, oh, desserts, push a new dessert. That's going to change the array. It's going to change the contents of the array, but it's not going to change the array. So React doesn't know to re-render it. So instead of pushing a new dessert, we need to use set desserts to do like set desserts. And then we would set it to, we would spread out the new desserts and add our new dessert like that. So we can, and we'll go into that more when we start playing with APIs and stuff more, but know that when like that.
Thank you.
So we would have to replace it with a new array. We can, but it won't work. But we don't change the contents of arrays and objects. We have to replace them with new ones, even if we're just like changing one little thing. And that tells React, oh, it's changed. I need to re-render it.
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
For the line 11 to 15, is that like gonna be like the same format for get effect? That like gonna be like similar syntax or is it that the way this is gonna be like for pet kit?
For like patches and posts and stuff.
No, I mean, I'm just saying, like, let's say the question asked, like, can you like get the list and put it on the brochure so everyone can see it? So I'm just wondering if the line 11 to 15 is just that is like the way it is, or is there gonna be like any change, or this is just the way it's going to be?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding right, this is just a function, so it can do anything JavaScript can do. We just happen to be using it for a fetch here. But yeah, this is whenever you're fetching data at the beginning of a page, that's what it's normally going to do. But we can take this out and just have it do the page loading. And so then the first time it renders, it's going to say, oh, page loads. And then after that, it's not going to. But yeah, this is just a JavaScript function, if I'm understanding correctly. Did that answer what you're asking?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just like, let's say for the future labs, like when we start with use a pest, I'm just wondering, this is gonna be the way to do get pest.
Yeah,
Like,
so you're always going to do the get fetch.
okay.
Yeah. Yep.
This is the way, right?
Yeah.
The same way. Okay, got it. Thank you.
And for most of what you're going to be doing for anything, like your use effect is going to look almost exactly like this, just changing the API and what you do with the API for the initial get anyway. Yeah, but we'll take a look at more of this on Monday. There's a lot. We'll play with the whole API thing there, but this is just a little sneak preview. But yeah, this right here, this exercises everything that's going to be on the code challenge next week. So I don't need that. There we go. Yeah, so play around with this stuff, making components, passing for the information flow part, passing the functions into the components is the important part. But yeah, like here, doing this fetch and adding event listeners and passing functions down and components and all that, this is pretty much it. You already know how to do the rest of the fetch stuff, so you can probably figure that out, but we'll go over that on Monday for sure. Sweet. I feel like that's a lot of stuff. That's plenty for brains right now. What other questions do we have about any of this stuff? We just had brains explode. Cool. Yeah, I think we can leave it here. Let me stop sharing somehow. There we go. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So again, this is a lot fire hose, but a lot of the stuff is stuff that you already know how to do, just in different syntax, basically. And hopefully syntax that makes it easier to do the stuff you want to do more quickly, faster. Yeah, I mean, this is day 3 of React. You've had 2.5 days to learn this stuff. So if you're feeling behind or overwhelmed, yeah, it's a lot to take in. It took me months to learn this when I was learning it on my own. So don't feel bad about not getting it all immediately, for sure. Cool. Any last questions before we wrap up? Awesome. I'll post this video in the usual places and put a link on the channel. So review it as you like. I also posted my old videos from the last cohort. Feel free to creep on all my YouTube. It's up there for a reason. And yeah, post questions in the channel. And otherwise, I'll see you all in a little bit. Thanks for hanging out.